Coming up in our newscast tonight. Meeting with his cabinet, President Moon Jae-in highlighted the importance of making visible progress in peace and denuclearization and how a second Pyongyang-Washington summit would play an immense role in such efforts. The recently appointed U.S. envoy on North Korea met with his South Korean counterpart, the nation's top diplomat, and President Moon. Stephen Biegun highlighted the great opportunity at hand for peace and denuclearization and the need to make the most of it. A special committee dedicated to improving the employment situation in Korea unveiled their latest plans. They include creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in biohealth, software, and intellectual property in the next decade. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome, I'm Daniel Choi. Anticipation builds as there are talks of a possible second summit between the leaders of Pyongyang and Washington. President Moon Jae-in highlighted the necessity of such a meeting so that the two key players make crucial progress in denuclearization efforts. Shin Se-min has our top story.
Less than a week left before President Moon Jae-in heads to Pyongyang for his third encounter with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and a call for big moves by the regional players. Chairing his weekly meeting with the cabinet, President Moon said the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. need to hold a second summit themselves, and he asked both parties to make bold decisions.
이제 북한이 보유 중인 핵을 폐기하는 한 차원 더 높은 단계로 나아가려면 다시 한번 북미 양 정상 간의 통큰 구상과 대담한 결단이 필요합니다. 한반도의 완전한 비핵화는 기본적으로 북미 간의 협상으로 해결되어야 할 문제입니다.
And the president said he will continue to act as a mediator between the two, a role he said both Kim Jong-un and President Trump have asked him to play. He added that Pyongyang needs to follow through on dismantling its nuclear facilities, and Washington needs to take corresponding steps. And when that happens, the two sides must put aside their deep-rooted distrust embedded between them since 70 years ago. Internally, the Moon administration is doing its best to accelerate the denuclearization drive. The government has finalized a bill on ratifying the inter-Korean agreement reached in April that it plans to submit to the parliament, and efforts to continue to bring lawmakers with the president on his trip to the north. Despite lawmakers being sharply divided over the trip, the top office says it plans to bring along those who do want to go. The big unknown is whether the summit next week will lead to another big step in denuclearizing the Korean peninsula, just as President Moon had said, since the administration has yet to win a bipartisan support in its diplomacy with the North. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the White House confirmed that Pyongyang's leader did send another letter to his American counterpart. In it, Kim Jong-un expressed willingness to meet with Donald Trump again to discuss denuclearization efforts. Lee Seung-jen has the latest.
Very warm and very positive. These are the words White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders used on Monday to describe the letter President Trump received from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, calling for a second meeting between the two leaders.
Yeah, the president has received the letter from Kim Jong-un. It was a very warm, very positive letter. We won't release the full letter unless the North Korean leader agrees that we should. The primary purpose of the letter was to request and look to schedule another meeting with the president, which we are open to and are already in the process of coordinating that.
Just last week, President Trump revealed he was expecting a letter from the North Korean leader amid stalled negotiations to dismantle the regime's nuclear weapons program. Asked whether a potential second summit could take place in Washington, the White House said the U.S. would be keen on hosting it on home ground.
We'll let you know when we have further details, but certainly something that we want to take place, and we'll already continue to work on making that happen.
President Trump and Kim held their first summit in Singapore in June. At the time, North Korea committed to work toward the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in exchange for security guarantees from the U.S. However, negotiations to implement the deal have appeared to hit an impasse as Washington demanded a full inventory of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal, while the regime insisted on first declaring a formal end to the Korean War. With another inter-Korean summit kicking off in the North Korean capital in exactly a week, the latest development has many asking whether there will be a second North Korea-US summit soon after. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Stephen Biegun is in Seoul. America's special representative for North Korea has been busy meeting with his counterpart in this nation, as well as the foreign minister. After being briefed on the latest developments, he conveyed his views on the situation and how to move forward. Here's Lee Ji-won with the highlights from those sessions.
What South Korea and the U.S. have to do now is to finish the job. This is what U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun said earlier when he had his first official sit-down with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hun. Biegun arrived in Seoul on Monday and made his first diplomatic visit to the Foreign Ministry on Tuesday. Seoul Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs Lee Do-hun briefed Biegun on the latest developments on the Korean Peninsula, including the results of the Special Envoy's trip to Pyongyang last week. They also exchanged views on the current situation and had an in-depth discussion about the strategies needed to achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and to achieve a stable peace in the region. Though Biegun said there is much work to be done, he seemed determined to move ahead.
As we have spoken with, we take very seriously the responsibilities that are on both of us. We have some hard work to do, but we also have a tremendous opportunity created by President Trump, by President Moon, and by Chairman Kim. And we need to do everything we can to take the most of this moment of opportunity. I've heard that there's a Korean proverb that the beginning is half done. Okay. And this is the beginning. So what we need to do is finish the job.
Prior to meeting his counterpart, Biegun also paid a visit to Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, with whom he reaffirmed the Seoul-Washington alliance, especially with major diplomatic events coming up, including the Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang and the UN General Assembly. Biegun also met with Seoul's Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun. The Inter-Korean Liaison Office is expected to be launched soon, so this meeting, according to the Foreign Ministry, will have contributed to the U.S. side's understanding of the situation. Biegun will conclude his 3-day trip on Wednesday and fly to China and Japan. But he is expected back in Seoul sometime this week to share the results of his talks in Beijing and Tokyo. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Biegun also met with President Moon, and the duo discussed ways to put some speed on the region's denuclearization process. The South Korean leader urged the envoy to play a constructive role in establishing lasting peace on the peninsula. They agreed to continue the close cooperation between Seoul and Washington to create a virtuous cycle in bringing about denuclearization talks between North Korea and the United States. The Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office is expected to start operations soon. An unnamed Unification Ministry official told reporters that the ministry is working to make that happen later this week. When asked whether it could be this Friday, he said yes. The official added that 50 to 100 officials, each from Seoul and Pyongyang, are expected to attend the opening ceremony. The two Koreas had agreed to open up the office within the joint factory park in Kaesong and have worked together to renovate the relevant buildings in the complex. Eight people who have been in contact with the South Korean MERS patient tested negative for the disease. The government is still keeping close tabs on others who may have contracted the virus, with President Moon Jae-in calling for a prompt response. Yoon Jung-min gets us up to speed with the developments.
8 out of the 10 people who had come in close contact with a man recently diagnosed with MERS have been confirmed free of the virus after 2 rounds of tests. The country's quarantine agency said Tuesday it has released the 8 patients, who included a British woman who flew on the same airplane as the 61-year-old man who does have the virus. The health authorities will now classify the 8 people as having had non-direct or so-called ordinary contact with the original patient, which will allow them to still be monitored. The government is keeping a close eye on 21 other people who came into close contact with him, including passengers, flight attendants, and medical workers. Those people have been placed under quarantine at home. The authorities say, however, that the whereabouts of 50 foreigners who flew with the patient remain unknown. On Tuesday, President Moon Jae-in said in a cabinet meeting that it is important to keep people updated on the issue and urged a prompt and thorough response to the highly infectious disease.
질병관리본부가 현장 대응과 지휘에 집중하고 정부는 적극 지원하면서 진행 상황을 국민들께 투명하게 알리는 것이 중요합니다.
The Foreign Ministry also said in a briefing that it is closely working its response with the government of Kuwait, where the man contracted the virus. He was diagnosed and hospitalized on Saturday after he returned home from a business trip there and showed symptoms. Korea was hit hard by an outbreak in 2015, which infected more than 180 people and left dozens dead. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Korea's traditional Thanksgiving holiday Chuseok is coming up soon, meaning families will get together and cook up quite a feast. Which is why President Moon ordered his cabinet to look into fluctuating food prices. He wants to make sure people won't have to worry about the surging price of fresh produce or the supply of goods used at family gatherings and rituals. Along with the First Lady, the South Korean leader went to the farmers market temporarily being held at the top office and bought some produce in the hopes of stimulating consumer spending ahead of the holiday. More power will be granted to local governments to boost their autonomy and accountability while realizing sovereignty of residents. The announcement was made by the Committee on Autonomy and Decentralization after the matter was reviewed and finalized during President Moon's cabinet meeting this morning. The change should help expand the political rights of local residents, allowing them to submit bills directly to local councils. The plan also seeks fiscal decentralization. It's going to raise local tax rates so they're closer to the amount levied by the national government. That ratio will be 6-4, a significant change from the current 8-2. To promote cooperation between the central and local governments and also among local governments, there will be regular meetings between the president and the heads of local governments. Seoul's Prime Minister is now in Vladivostok for the Eastern Economic Forum. Yoon Nagyun first met with his Japanese counterpart. Talks center around bilateral ties as well as Pyongyang-Tokyo relations. Cha Sang-mi shares with us what was discussed.
South Korean Prime Minister Yoon Nagyun met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Tuesday at the 4th Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia. In his one-on-one with Lee, Abe said that Tokyo is intent on normalizing its relations with Pyongyang if the two sides are able to resolve issues of their unhappy past, including the abduction of Japanese citizens and the North's ballistic missiles. He also called for close trilateral cooperation among Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo in the pursuit of regional peace and stability through Pyongyang's complete denuclearization. Abe added that North Korea has a bright future if it implements appropriate policies, noting that the North has abundant resources and hardworking people. The South Korean PM agreed with Abe and encouraged improvements in Tokyo's ties with Pyongyang. He said their relations will contribute a great deal to establishing peace on the Korean peninsula as well as in Northeast Asia. As for relations between Tokyo and Seoul, Prime Minister Lee picked 3 major issues to work on: peace and stability in Northeast Asia, economic cooperation, and environmental and global issues, with which Abe agreed. He also called on Japan to cooperate on issues including reopening of South Korea-Japan negotiation channels, sealing a fisheries agreement, and revising their social security agreement. The two prime ministers also discussed the controversial issue of the victims of Japan's past sexual enslavement of Korean women. After an exchange of views, they decided to respond to the issue wisely, based on mutual trust. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Seoul and Tokyo agreed on the need to keep working together closely to achieve North Korea's denuclearization. Over in Hanoi, South Korea's top diplomat briefed her Japanese counterpart on the results of President Moon Jae-in's special envoy's recent visit to Pyongyang and asked for active support. Kang Kyung-hwa also expressed hopes for future-oriented bilateral relations. Taro Kono thanked Seoul for keeping Tokyo in the loop on the latest developments and said he looks forward to President Moon Jae-in's visit to Japan. Tackling depressing employment figures remains a top priority for the South Korean government. Today, the Presidential Committee on Job Creation laid out plans in industries expected to grow in the future. For details, let's turn to our Ko-Ryun-hee.
South Korea's Presidential Committee on Job Creation held its 7th meeting on Tuesday and vowed to boost employment in 3 promising industrial sectors by 2022. The plan aims to create 112,000 jobs in biohealth, software, and intellectual property industries by 2022 by spending more than $549.2 million in those sectors next year. The government sees biohealth as a growing industry in a rapidly aging society and aims to create 42,000 jobs in this sector. The Ministry of Health and Welfare said it will look to foster the pharmaceutical, medical equipment, and cosmetics sectors and support overseas projects. The government is also targeting the software industry in order to help the country meet the needs of the 4th Industrial Revolution. South Korea's Ministry of Science and ICT aims to create 24,000 more jobs by supporting 35 universities which focus on software by next year, up from 25 this year. The ministry said it will also look to foster artificial intelligence graduate schools to train skilled scientists in the field. And 46,000 jobs will be created in the intellectual property sector. The Korean Intellectual Property Office will strive to connect students, universities, and companies in related fields. It will encourage universities to provide intellectual property classes and companies to hire those students who complete the session. These efforts to boost job creation come after the number of newly employed people in South Korea hit its lowest level since 2010 in July. Ko-Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
There are signs of a slump in the manufacturing sector, once considered the backbone of the local economy. A prolonged slowdown could drag the country into a recession as business sentiment in the industry dips and ability to repay debts erodes away. Kim Ji-yeon breaks down the concerning digits for us.
A slowdown in South Korea's manufacturing sector, namely its traditionally strong shipbuilding and auto sectors, suggests the local economy may be heading toward a recession. Data released by the OECD on Monday shows the composite leading indicator for the country recorded 99.2 for July, 0.2 point lower than the previous month. A reading below 100 means an economy is in a downtrend, and it signifies that economic growth in South Korea is slower compared to other OECD member countries. The indicator has been falling for 16 months in a row now after hitting a peak of 100.98 in March 2017. The indicator is used by the OECD to predict a country's economic conditions 6 to 9 months down the line, and is based on various data from the Bank of Korea and Statistics Korea on the inventory cycles of the nation's manufacturing sectors, as well as business sentiment among manufacturers. Separate data from Korea's Financial Supervisory Service released on Tuesday shows a sharp monthly increase in the amount of overdue debt owed by small and mid-sized companies, meaning their ability to repay loans fell. The financial watchdog says late loan payments mainly came from subcontractors of large conglomerates in the auto and shipbuilding sectors that endured restructuring. It says their overdue interest rates rose by 0.1 percentage points from a month earlier to around 0.6% in late July. Overdue interest rates overall, including those of conglomerates and households, maintained their previous level, edging up by less than 0.05% in July. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, we can find some solace in the fact that for 4 months straight, Korean shipbuilders have maintained the #1 spot in terms of global shipbuilding order volume. According to a report by Clarkson Research, in August, Seoul secured orders equal to 540,000 compensated gross tons to build 10 ships. That accounted for over 40% of orders worldwide. China was runner-up with 320,000 CGTs, or 14 vessels, and Taiwan third with 280,000, or 10 ships. South Korea also ranked first in cumulative orders between January and August, totaling over 7.5 million CGTs. That's around 172 vessels. The trade war between the U.S. and China seems to be pushing Beijing closer to Moscow. The two sides are considering 73 joint investment projects that are worth more than $100 billion. At the 4th Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russian and Chinese businesses held meetings to cooperate on the economic front, as both try to achieve economic stability amid rocky relations with Washington, sanctions against Moscow, and escalating tariff measures against Beijing. The Russia-China Investment Fund and the China's TUS Holdings announced Tuesday joint investment plans focused on developing technology, including building a Sino-Russian technology park. While in Vladivostok, the leaders of both nations are expected to discuss these issues as well and witness the signing of documents. Google is officially launching Korean services for its AI-powered smart speakers, although they're entering the race in Seoul 2 years after the devices are unveiled in other markets. It seems like the IT giant is more than ready to take on local competitors. Oh Soo-young delves deeper to find out why.
Google Home will soon be making its way into South Korean households, providing its AI speaker services in the local language. The global IT giant unveiled its Korean language service on Tuesday, a week before the devices hit the shelves.
Currently number 2 in the global market after Amazon's Echo, Google Home is expected to make quite a splash here in Korea, with this highly anticipated launch coming 2 years after Google initially released its AI speaker in other parts of the world.
It's clearly prepared to make up for lost time. In addition to the typical voice-controlled AI functions, such as streaming music and dimming down the lights, Google draws from its wealth of data and platforms used globally to provide differentiated services.
You can use Google Assistant with your mobile phone, with Google Home at home, and also even while you're driving via Android Auto. So you can use 2 languages at the same time. Google Home will know which language you're speaking and answer back to that language. We also understand your voice and know who you are, so we provide answer based on who you are.
Korea is one of the biggest markets for AI speakers, coming third globally in terms of sales in the first quarter of 2018. Demand is expected to grow even further, with the number of smart speakers installed in the country set to double to 3 million this year. Now with its Korean service launch, Google is well positioned to dislodge local companies, including Samsung, Naver and Kakao, given the sheer size of its database and the fact that 90% of smartphones in the country are powered by the company's Android platform. Experts say Korean companies need to develop more localized services and contents to retain their appeal.
Google is the world's top search engine, but local portals like Naver remains the most used in South Korea. Google can't respond quickly to the diverse needs of Korean consumers who demand fast services. So there's potential for more services that reflect that, in addition to the current food delivery and language learning services.
The expert, who is developing core technologies for the likes of LG and SK, also stressed the need for firms to improve voice recognition and processing for their products to provide swifter and more accurate services, as competition is only expected to get stiffer in the foreseeable future. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle back at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the huge daily temperature differences are taking a toll on the health of everyone here in Korea.
That's right, Daniel. Now, these days we have cool air with just the right amount of humidity, but it's important to keep in mind that the temperature rapidly drops as soon as the sun goes down. Now, the gaps are also widening, so an extra layer to keep you warm is now a must. Mild weather conditions are dominating the forecast once again, and it's the same for Beijing too tomorrow. But there will be sporadic showers, especially Jeju Island and the south and eastern coastal areas. We'll see rain tonight until tomorrow morning for most parts, around 5 to 20 millimeters. But the morning temperature seems to be dropping by the day now too, with Seoul starting the day at 17 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju begins at 21 degrees. But the day with the strong sunlight, it will be prevalent, with Seoul topping out to 28 degrees Celsius tomorrow and 26 in Daegu and 24 in Gyeongju. Most of the nation will receive plenty of sunlight again until Thursday, that is. And on Friday, there's going to be another nationwide rain. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.